I have a problem. Well, I have lots of problems, but this one specific one is something that a lot of hobbyist woodworkers and even some small-scale professional woodworkers run into, and that's actually selling items. At the moment, I'm working on these mallets, slowly working on these brass head mallets, and I want to have some nice packaging that goes alongside them. I'll have a nice cardboard box and a little insert, then they'll go in a tough bag mailer and be sent out. The boxes though, being a custom size with custom inserts, don't make a lot of sense financially for a small scale operation. Maybe I'll only do 20 or 50 of these in my lifetime, but it doesn't make sense to buy 1,000 boxes, whatever the minimum order quantity is for this small scale operation. So in this episode, I am going to investigate using lasers and screen printing to make my own packaging. Now, to be clear, I'm not suggesting you go out and buy a laser or a screen printer just to make your own packaging for hobbyist woodworking. If you're already looking at a laser or already have a laser, you might think about other accessories so that you can use the tools you already own, but for more things. Not trying to sell you on the concept of buying a laser just for packaging. So the first step was getting some cardboard blanks to work with. These are from Pet Circle because we buy our cat litter from Pet Circle. It comes in big boxes. So I cut these down with a track saw. This makes them not recycled, but 1R better, it's reuse. Having a uniform size to start with makes the whole process of cutting them out on the laser a lot easier. Using the track saw because that applies pressure on top of the piece as well as below the cutting board. Whereas if you do it on a table saw, it can lift up a little bit. Perfectly safe to do it on the table saw, but this was pretty quick anyway, and it didn't run the risk of running into any staples. Next up is actually designing the box so it can be cut on the laser. This is what I've gone for. Pretty simple little display box. Again, there'll be packaging around it, so it doesn't need to be super durable. And I will engrave or print on the top and some inserts on the inside to make it very presentable. Now, I didn't draw up the box because I can work with wood. I'm not really that good with cardboard, so a lot of things I wouldn't have considered, like the taper angles and the dust flaps and whatever. I use a website called Template Maker, which makes templates for things like this, so you can generate a box and it'll give you a vector file that you can take to your laser or Cricut or Silhouette or whatever, and then you can use that software to cut it out. Next up is actually getting the cardboard into the laser. With the box cut and loosely assembled, we can plonk the mallet in, and that looks alright. I think we can do it a little bit better on the presentation. First, we need to separate the mallet head from the handle to really show off what this mallet is all about. That's much better, but we need something to keep these from rattling around and banging into each other. Fairly recently I did a video on making a chisel tray, and in that I cut some EVA foam, which is a pretty good material for this type of thing. But it does get a little bit better. You can also engrave on EVA foam. The only problem I have with it is it's not quite thick enough. I need it a little bit thicker so that it's not going to roll out of the foam. And it's very stinky, and I kind of like the entirely recyclable box and packaging thing. So making everything out of cardboard is a little bit more advantageous than making some of it out of cardboard and some out of EVA. So to that end, I've got this stack of cardboard cutouts instead. So this looks pretty good. This is nice and secure. It's not really going to go anywhere when the lid is on top, but we do lose the engraving that we get with the EVA. Unfortunately, corrugated cardboard doesn't engrave all that well. You get quite a lot of inconsistencies because of the material tends to go right through it or be very faint. However, there is chipboard. Chipboard is this type of cardboard. It's the type of cardboard you'd find in a cereal box, maybe a little bit thicker, this stuff. We don't have enough cereal boxes for me to make all the packaging from, so I did have to buy it new, but it is a very inexpensive material. It cuts and engraves beautifully and very quickly too. So this seems like the perfect material. I can have 4 layers of the corrugated cardboard and chipboard on top, maybe a drop of glue to hold everything together, but even then I don't think I really need it. So now we can turn our attention to the outside of the box and making that look pretty with some screen printing. xTool sent me out their screen printing kit for lasers. This weirdly enough arrived on a pallet. It weighs in about 16 kilos for the full kit. I don't think it really needed a pallet. One thing to note is this will work on any types of lasers, whether it's diode, CO2, fiber, maybe not fiber, and it'll work with any brand out there. And if you have a diode laser, if it's 10 watts and above, it'll work no problem. Probably works on 5 watts, but I don't have settings for that. One thing to note about the xTool screen printing system is that the screens come pre-coated in emulsion. Unlike traditional screen printing where you need to first coat the screen in a photosensitive emulsion, pair a film, expose the film, cure the emulsion and wash it all off, these are just ready to go out of the box. These are also a stainless steel mesh rather than a nylon or polyester mesh because we're going to be burning off the emulsion with laser, and if it was polyester it would cut right through the screen very, very quickly. The screens need to be loaded into the frames. The frames are these aluminium frames from xTool that will go both into their screen printing jig machine thing as well as into the lasers. The screens are fairly easy to install though. There is a little bit of a knack to it. You push the bracket pieces into the frame through the screens, sandwiching the screens I should say, and then use the cam levers to stretch the screen and lock it all in position. This is quite an easy system, and the drumming sound is a good way to know whether it has enough tension or not. The whole idea with making these screens pre-coated is to make the whole process as easy and as quick as possible. Going for the traditional route, you could take a day to get all the emulsion onto the screen dry enough, doing all your curing and all that. I don't have enough experience with screen printing, pretty much nothing at this point, so I can't really comment on how much quicker this is over the traditional systems, but it certainly doesn't require a lot of skill, and I've got plenty of not a lot of skill. In the case of the S1, it comes with this little bracket doohickey that we screw into the machine, and then this indexes on the screens, which is really quite neat. If you've got the D1, there is the xTool D1 that is, there is an appropriate bracket as well. It might be for the D1 Pro only, I'm not entirely certain. To install the bracket first, we push the laser back, need to take out our honeycomb board. Then there are 2 screws here that need to be removed. Then the bracket just sits over those 2 holes and you screw it back in, and that's really all you need. So bracket is installed, screen goes in upside down. Done. xTool Creative Space has some built-in stuff around the screen printing jig, so it knows where the screen should be if you're using the indexing jig, which if you've got it, you may as well because it makes it so much easier. It also reminds you to flip the pattern horizontally, otherwise it'll come out back to front. And you probably should rotate it 90 degrees because the screen is taller than it is wide, so you're going to get more print area, I guess. Cut out my screen for the packaging, and it's not very good. The image is clear, but it hasn't cut all the way through, so ink isn't getting all the way through when I go to use the screen printer. Now, it's mostly a PEBCAC, that is, problem exists between keyboard and chair, because I didn't do any power testing beforehand. I've just been using the default xTool settings. I've got a light behind the screen, so this should be all nice and white here where the light's coming through, but we can see that some of the emulsion hasn't actually been burnt off by the laser. That could be for a variety of factors. Maybe the emulsion was slightly thicker in a couple of spots, maybe the laser power varied just enough that it didn't burn all the way through. The tricky thing with the screen printing screens is that you need to use enough power to burn through the emulsion, but not so much that you deform the steel mesh that's underneath. And this one here is the exact same shape, except I think it was 2% more power. And we can see that it's much cleaner. It still has some little spots here. So it's not perfect, but it's a lot better with just a small power adjustment. Since the screen is no good because of the problems that I caused, I can use this screen to do all that power testing, dial that in. xTool do have a support article with all the patterns and what sort of power ranges you should be looking at for each machine. So I'm going to run that now, and that'll help determine what settings that I need for this machine to cut these screens. This will be the day that some of you learn that I am an idiot, because I did 2 test grids. The first test grid, I don't know what I did, but I made all of the settings the same and also not even as much as the default settings. They were like less power, so none of them cut through. The second one, we'll take a closer look because the light is shining through. This will be a little bit tricky to see, but try and bear with me. So we have a power grid here, which has increases in speed on this axis and increases in power on this axis. So this is the slowest, least powerful. This is the fastest, most powerful. So ideally we want to be as fast as possible so that it's just quicker to work with, but we also need to have it clear because we can see here it hasn't cleared all the way through, so we're going to get a substandard result. The slower a laser goes, the more energy is directed into whatever it's burning. So typically the slow ones will be pretty good, and as they get faster they get progressively worse. So we can see that at 60% power it's pretty good at any speed. 55, it's not bad. This top speed is just a few little bits that haven't come off. So I think I'm going to go for 290 millimeters a second at 55% power because that's a nice compromise between speed and power. I'm pleased with how the screen has come out this time around. Only issue is a couple of little artwork issues, and unfortunately that's on me. But we can get to printing. So now it is time to talk about the screen printer. This is the xTool screen printer jig thing. It's heart of the system. The screens insert really easily. This is one of the good things about these frames. 2 cams to lock it down, and then it's on a hinged thing. So you put your artwork in, screen down, swipe across with the squeegee. You can see these 3 pins here, they are controlled by these knobs at the front here, so this will adjust up and down, and these 2 will adjust tilt or left to right if you put them in unison. And that's to move the platen back and forth, which is magnetized. This has a sticky top on it, removable top, for materials that might slide around. In the case of a t-shirt, you can pop it around the platen, but obviously a piece of paper, or in our case a cardboard box, we can't do that. I've got some tape down to tell me where to put the thing so it lines up with the artwork, the box. And the sticky surface, it's tacky. It's not going to hold it if we were to really abrade on it or cut into it or something, but it's holding enough for the screen printing. On this side of the jig we've got a locking knob for the height adjustment, so if you had something a little bit thicker, otherwise we just lower it so it's touching, lock it in place, and then a little hinge from that point. I think for the packaging, just the label part of it here, we're going to go with just a simple black. And keep in mind, I am an idiot when it comes to lots of things, but screen printing is especially, so I may not be doing this correctly. I've done this exactly once on paper. See how it goes on cardboard. 45-degree angle. It's priming that screen. And then I don't want all this ink when I actually press it onto the cardboard. I found that it bleeds a little bit too much. This ink is a little bit on the runny side for paper, or at least that's how my experiences went. So I'm just trying to scrape off the excess here. I can now press it down and get my cleaner edge. And I'm not picking up more ink as I go. That's a bit heavy, but that actually looks pretty good. Second sheet loaded in, second box, and just rinse and repeat. I'm pretty happy with how that's turning out. A little bit not great here, but this is just technique issues while talking on camera, which is mostly just awkward because I can't get my body into the right physical location. Alright, so it's not perfect, but this is box design, not perfect. I've made the bottom piece a little bit too narrow. I can't tuck this in, but that's a result I'm actually pretty happy with. I'm quite proud of how that's turned out. And the screen printing on this, it's not perfect, but it's getting better with every time I do it. This was the very first one. I didn't quite press hard enough, but we've got some good coverage there. I've had a few duds. They're good in some ways, less good in others. But again, this is just a technique thing. The screen printing on cardboard is a little bit harder than fabric. Well, I should say it's a lot harder than fabric. But again, the results are coming up great. Sweet. I am very pleased with how that turned out. I had to run inside and heat set that with an iron. I'm not convinced that all the cat hair that I added to it has helped, but it is such a clear image. I'm not sure whether my body, the t-shirt, or the print is lopsided, so ignore any orientation issues. Well, I wasn't planning on doing any sort of merch. I don't want to be a t-shirt printer, that's not my jam. But this was very easy to get a great result and gets quite fine detail despite only being a 100 mesh screen. xTool do have 200 mesh screens though. They're not available in Australia just yet to order, but they are in the US. So this has got a lot of detail, which is cool, and I guess if you're doing multiple colors, you would be able to line them up very easily because you're using the laser for the positioning for burning the screen, and then this goes in to the exact same spot every time. It's just then lining up your t-shirt or your cardboard or whatever, which relatively easy if your design starts in the same position every single time. So I think that's real cool. I don't have a multicolour design to work from at the moment, so I'm just going to go with more of these Stanley patents and things like that. But yeah, I'm really stoked with how that's turned out. If you're making small products, whether it's a batch or individual custom items, having your own custom packaging, it looks like this for not a lot of effort. That's pretty nice. It's definitely a way to stand out from the crowd. I still have a bunch of things I need to improve on this. I haven't quite got the box dimensions right. I'll need to go back to the website and maybe tweak a few things. I don't think it's actually taken into consideration the thickness of the material. And the screen printing is not going to change. I'm going to keep that the same because I'm really happy with it. It's just a few technique things I need to work out. If you're doing multicolour stuff though, the laser's great from that point of view because it takes the human element out of lining everything up. And that's definitely the hardest part, is making sure your screens all line up for the multicolour print. Yeah, so that's the xTool screen printer with the xTool S1 laser. It's not a review, so draw your own conclusions. I think that was really cool. So I'll definitely be using this alongside my woodworking, which takes up a lot more time than I'd like for my woodworking, but you know how that goes. To use it in woodworking is a little bit trickier because this works great on fabrics and cardboard and paper and all that, but for woodworking it's maybe a little bit less useful. That being said, if you do gilding and you want to put gold leaf on everything, maybe you'll brand the underside of your furniture in gold leaf. There are gold leaf sizing products that are designed for screen printers. I think it's the Mona Lisa Extra Thick by Speedball is designed to go through that, through screen printing. So you could have your logo as a screen, push it through, then you stick gold leaf down, and that'd look pretty fancy. I just haven't been able to locate any of that local to me and haven't wanted to pay shipping for it just yet. Thanks to xTool for sending me the machine to play with. Thanks to you for watching.